Good morning everyone and welcome to day 5 of Vlogmas. I have had a slightly disorganised start to the day because I accidentally picked up Tom's keys instead of my keys, and I didn't realise until I got to the studio we both have each other's car keys on our sets of keys because we'll often swap between which car we're taking. But I have my studio keys on my set of keys and he has his office key on his set of keys. And I didn't realise that I'd picked up the wrong keys until I got to the studio. Normally, it's not an issue because normally Tom leaves the house before me because I do the school run. I take Jasper to school. So he's normally kind of gone and left and taken his keys before me. So it's not usually an issue. But this morning he has a hair appointment. So he wasn't going in until a little bit later. So I just grabbed the keys that were on the top of the key bowl, didn't even think about it, and didn't realise until I got to the studio and went to unlock the door of the studio and realised that I had completely the wrong keys. So yeah, fortunately he was leaving very soon, so I just waited and he swung by the studio on his way into work and we swapped keys. But yeah, slightly disorganised start to the morning. It also means that I'm a little bit later into the studio than I normally would be, but it's fine. Today we are having a dye day. So I am going to be dyeing up some yarn for the shop update that's coming on the 12th of December, which will be a bit of a mix, I've decided, a bit of a mix of a festive shop update with some of the colours coming back from the weekly advent last year, and also I'm going to get the Discworld yarns up and get them up so that they're out there and people can order, because I've had questions about when the rest of the Discworld colourways are coming and I keep saying they're coming soon, I promise, and then I've just not managed it. So I'm just going to get them out there. And I feel like that'll wrap the year up nicely if they're out there and they're done. So today we're going to be dyeing the festive yarn. So last year's weekly advent was inspired by The Grinch Who Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss, and it's one of my favourite Christmas books. We used to read it. My dad loved it, so he always read it to us every Christmas when we were children, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. I can remember him doing like big poster drawings of the Grinch and all the pictures from the book and things like that as well to like tell the story, and yeah, it was always a favourite in our household. So that's what we're going to be dyeing today. There are 4 colourways, and fortunately I have recipes for them all because they are colourways from previous years, which makes life a lot easier and will make the dyeing process a lot easier. And what I'm planning to do is kind of bring you along with me and try and explain what I'm doing as I'm going, so that you get like a little bit of a behind the scenes insight into my dyeing process and things like that, because a lot of us dye very differently. We all use very different equipment, we all dye in very different ways, so it's quite interesting to see from different indie dyers different perspectives of their dye days and things like that. So that is the plan. I need first of all to get the yarn in the ovens to heat up, so that is the first step, so we shall go and do that. So our first batch of yarn has been soaking overnight, just in a mix of water and vinegar. I like to use vinegar. You can use citric acid, but the main reasons I use vinegar, it's distilled white vinegar that I use, and the main reasons I use it is because, one, it's cheaper than citric acid, and also it doesn't dull sparkle. So there is some sparkle yarn in here. I'm sure it's not going to come across on the camera. It never does, especially not in the water. But the citric acid has a tendency to dull sparkle in sparkle yarns, whereas vinegar doesn't. So I just find it easier. I just find it easier to stick with one thing, so that's what we use. I have it on this trolley because there is no water in my actual dye room. The only water I have is in the little kitchenette in the main room of the studio, so I have to transport water back and forward between the dye space and the kitchenette. So I have my handy little trolley to help me do that. Let's go get this warming up. So let's start our dye day. I had to do a little silly clip of me coming in with my trolley, but honestly this is so helpful for getting water to and from the 2 different rooms. I start off by obviously getting the yarn in the pans. I tend to heat the yarn first. Some people will put dye in from cold. I like my pans to be hot before I start putting the dye in. So I will put yarn in the pans and then I will add water to the pans, and then I'll put them in the oven for about half an hour to get up to temperature. I could just put the water in the oven without the yarn. That would be absolutely fine because it's really the water that I want to get up for temperature. However, I just find that the pans are easier to maneuver with the amount of water in them when they've got yarn in. Otherwise, I have a tendency to spill water absolutely everywhere. One thing people often ask me is how do I heat my yarn, because I'll share videos on social media and things like that of the pans and the dyeing in the pans, because that's the pretty bit, but I very rarely share my actual ovens because they're not particularly attractive. But these are what I have. So these are Buffalo convection ovens. They each fit 4 pans in, which means I can get 8 pans going at once, and it takes, I don't know, about 40, well, half an hour for it to heat up to start with, and then each pan of dye will take me about 40 minutes. I usually put the dye on, give it 20 minutes to set, put more dye on, give it another 20 minutes to set, and then I'll go straight in with the next colourways, because the water, I'll reuse the water in the pans, assuming that it's all exhausted, which it should have done. I will then reuse the water in the pans for the next lot of dye. So it's already hot, the water is already hot, so it kind of speeds up a little bit once you've had the initial kind of half an hour of heating. So that is what we need to do now. We need half an hour for these to heat, so I am going to go and have a cup of tea and some breakfast. I hadn't planned it this way, but these are actually 4 really good colourways to use for this video, because I use 4 very different techniques while I'm dyeing them. So you'll get to see a whole range of different techniques. I have sped the videos up a little bit because obviously this takes me, well, according to the length this video clip was before I sped it up, this took me about 3.5 minutes to do both of these pans. And that's a really long time to talk to you on a voiceover without getting lots of breaks and sounding really awkward. Anyway, we are starting with, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. This is our first Grinch colourway, inspired obviously by the fact that the Grinch turns his dog Max into a reindeer for his grand plan. Now this has a brown base colour, and then it has flashes of red, which is what I'm doing right now, and also flashes of kind of a golden yellow, and it's then covered in lots of different brown speckles to give you a nice bit of tonality. But these flashes, when it knits up, these flashes will give you nice little kind of, if you're knitting a pair of socks, which is what these were originally designed for, it will give you nice little kind of flashes and sections of the red and gold colours as you're knitting it up. I really like doing this technique. I really like how the yarns look in the skein when I do it this way. And it's quite a fun one to do with lots of different colours. Next up, we have He Got Her a Drink and Sent Her to Bed, which is inspired by Cindy Lou Who, the little girl who interrupts him when he is attempting to steal their Christmas tree and presents and food and basically anything festive from their house. In my mind, Cindy Lou was always a very sweet and innocent character. So we've gone for kind of pastel-y colours, basically. So we're starting with a base of pink and blue, well, turquoise, really, technically, if you're going to be fussy about your colours. And then speckles of purple, turquoise and pink on there. And it makes for a really kind of pretty pastel-y colourway. I really, really like how this one came out, and I feel like it really reflects the character of Cindy Lou Who really, really well. So that is the first half of the dyeing done. Then we basically just go back and repeat the process on the second side. So I'll flip the yarn, and most of the time I repeat the same thing again on side 2 that I did on side 1. Occasionally it's a little bit different. It varies depending on the colourway. But with these colourways, it's pretty much the same on both sides. wanted to show you, these are the pans that the yarn has just come out. So as you can see, the dye has completely exhausted and that water is clear, which is how I can then reuse that water for the next colourway. The pans need a little bit of a clean because, as you can kind of see just kind of over here, there is some dye residue on the side of the pans, but not enough that it's going to really affect the colour of the water. Next up we have the third colourway. This one is The Grinch's Small Heart Grew 3 Times That Day. This is technically the fourth colourway actually in the order that they originally went out. It just happens to be the third colour that I'm dyeing today. And this one, of course, had to be pink because it was all about love and acceptance and kindness and everything like that. So we have a very bright pink base, which then has speckles of various different pinks on top, but also some burgundy on top that kind of tones it down slightly. And I really, really like how this colourway came out. I like how all the colourways in this collection came out, to be honest. And finally, we have our last colourway. This one is, I think actually this was the first colourway, and again, I've dyed them in a different order to the way they were in the weekly advent, but this one is The Grinch Hated Christmas. I'm not sure how well this will come across on the camera. I think it's going to come across quite blue or teal. It is very green, but sometimes colours are hard to translate. But this one has a kind of green and almost a turquoisey base colour. Again, you're seeing another technique here. I use different techniques for pretty much all of these colourways, which is quite fun. So it has a two-toned base colour, and then it's covered in speckles of various different greens. I think there's about 3 or 4 different greens in there, varying from kind of olivey greens with a more yellow kind of base to kind of sagey greens with a much more kind of blue kind of tone behind them to give us a really, really tonal green. I didn't want the Grinch colourway to be just a one-tone green. I'm not the biggest fan of kind of semi-solid, well, I like semi-solids, but not like one-tone colours particularly. So it definitely needed to be a very, very tonal green. And then finally, once the yarns are out of the oven, they have a nice soak, a nice bath. I use a big tub because I just find it easier. And again, I'm not worried about mixing these colours here because the pans were both completely clear. So the yarn and the dye is all completely set. So I'm not going to have any issues. I use a big sort of trug of water. This is just cold water with some eucalan in, which is a no rinse wool wash basically. So it's really, really handy. It will have had, well, I think this probably had a good half an hour at least. I don't know. It soaks for a little while, at least 10 minutes. And then I will take it out and I will pop it in my spinner. This piece of kit is a lifesaver for a yarn dyer, honestly. Before I had it, I used to roll everything up in towels and squeeze all the water out like that, and it took absolutely forever. So this bit of kit is amazing, and it squeezes all the water out for me so that I can then go and hang the yarn up to dry on the airers. I'm not going to be hanging all of the yarn up today. I'm actually going to leave some of it to cool down in the oven, and then I'll hang that one up tomorrow. So there we go. A dye day. I hope you enjoyed a slightly more in-depth look at my dyeing process. If you have any questions, then by all means leave them in the comments. I am doing my best to get back to everyone's comments every day. I really love that about Vlogmas. I love the comments that come in. So please let me know what you think. Leave me a comment, ask me a question. Oh, don't forget to get your Q&A questions in as well. Leave those in the comments. Anything you want to ask me, anything you want to ask Tom, anything you just want to know, any silly questions. We love a silly question. Then yeah, don't forget to get those in. But yeah, if you have any questions about my dyeing process or anything like that, then I'm happy to answer them in the comments. So just ask the questions. I will show you the finished and dried yarn later on in Vlogmas. The shop update for the yarn that I'm dyeing today isn't until the 12th, so I've got plenty of time to get it dried and skeined and labelled and everything like that. So I will no doubt share that a little bit later on in the month whilst I'm doing those kind of parts of it. But for now, all that is left to do for this video is, of course, joke of the day. And I had to go for a colour-based joke, considering we've been dyeing yarn and playing with colours all day. As always, coming from me, I can't promise it's going to be a good one. But here we go. What colour is the wind? Blue. See you all tomorrow. Bye.